Yes, later.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
And welcome. Apologies for absence.
Many, Chairman.
Thank you.
Councillors Colin Morgan, Jason Pritchard, Richard Auger, Fabian Fraser-Allen and Richard McElroy.
Thank you. Declarations of interest? None?
No.
Could I then go to the minutes?
Could I ask a question, Chairman?
No.
Now we
No
have
questions are allowed. Well,
No, we have two portfolio holder in our governance committee. Is that right? Because Mr. Councillor Morgan and Councillor Auger are our portfolio holder. Can they sit on our audit committee?
Yes, they can.
Thank you for the explanation.
can I go to the minutes of the last meeting, please?
Yes.
And we don't do confirm this is a true and accurate record, do we?
We need to agree them or...
All right, can you confirm they're a true and accurate record of the meeting, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Those who were present. Thank you so much. Do I date this because there's no date box?
No, it's fine, they were just before this meeting.
So that's the first page done. On down, 116 to go. We move straight to the audit letter.
Okay, I will start from here. I would, so there's three papers, so just to put them in context, there's the annual audit letter, which is actually only a summary of the thing that you had last time that we met, and does actually not have anything new in it compared to that. This is, the idea behind the annual audit letter is it's a sort of shorter, more easily accessible document for those of the general public who might be interested in such matters. Nevertheless, so there's that one. Then there's the third one, which is actually the grant report of the 16-17 year. So I'm going to suggest I do that one second.
Okay.
And then the third one is the plan
Right.
for the next year.
So the question I have in this simplified version is the table on page 5 different to last time?
No.
Because I couldn't find any differences. Good, okay. That answers my question. Okay, crack on.
So, I mean, apart from the fact that it repeats that information, summarises the fact that you had an unqualified audit opinion, an unqualified value for money conclusion, and that there were some adjustments, I don't want to dwell on this any further, but happy to take questions.
I'll give you one. Do you have any questions, Tim? No. Move on to...
I'll go on to
second document.
The grants report, which is actually the one that is
document 3, isn't it?
Because that also relates to, if you like, last financial year. So after we complete the audit, we move on to the grants.
Page 47.
That's right, 47. And in fact, in this case, it's really only about the housing benefit claim. So housing benefit is the main grant claim that we still do undertake across many councils, and it is actually quite a difficult, it's a highly complex area in terms of the different ways calculations are made, and it's quite a detailed audit with a very detailed methodology that isn't actually designed by us, but is designed by the department. I mean, essentially, we can say that there were a few minor errors, as it were, but the further testing was undertaken, and those errors, that type of error remained, and so we've reported the results of that testing to DWP, which gave an extrapolated basis for what that difference would be from that testing. But there were no recommendations and no further matters to report as a result of that work.
Did you want to say something, Audra?
I think I do.
Okay, let's move on then.
It's just really to note a couple of things on this one. In terms of that extrapolated error, I just want to put that in context. £2,800 out of 14.7 million.
I have to say, because I missed last year's letter, which came in 40 million wrong direction to find it, because I got the previous year's letter. And the last 2 years' letters prior to this one could almost be the same letter. It's so similar.
Yeah.
But the number must have been slightly different.
Yeah, it was, but other than that, I mean, the content of the letter is almost identical.
Well, we do
to
the same
last two.
tests.
To the last two.
It's the other thing is, 2,800, you think, why are we even reporting that? There are no sort of tolerance limits when it comes to the benefits claim. Unlike when we do the final accounts, the main audit, and you have your materiality levels, whether something's trivial or not, you have to report in terms of the benefits one. But really, it's a remarkable result, if I do say so myself, for the Revs and Bends.
Oh, please say it again. Go on.
For the Revs and Bends team, Chair.
It's a remarkable event.
A remarkable result.
Results,
Yeah.
right, say it again then. Remarkable result for the
I
Revs
don't
and
think I
Bends.
need to catch that again, Chair. I'm
So
sorry,
we've got it
it's
3
not
times in
good.
there for you. That's recorded.
Well, in fact, it's written on my paper because I say 2,000 for 14.45 million, we should congratulate the team. Now, what I do think, we pay £6,800 on audit fee.
Oh, it's disgusting, isn't it? The
And
money these auditors make on us is
But
terrible.
no, but I think it's not right. You know?
Yeah, but it's a set fee, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But I do think that it's public money, and
Yeah, but it's auditing 14 million quid worth of
There's no
transactions.
relationship
Yeah,
between
yeah,
the
I
error
know.
and the fee.
No.
You should
I know.
say it's a very
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
fee compared to the amount that
yes,
we're
I
auditing.
do agree.
Yeah.
I think.
That would be an equally sensible
Yeah.
conclusion to reach.
So we get a
Yeah.
page
Neither of
21,
which are
so we get a
really
page
valuable
21.
to check by the
Let's get a
department.
page
Yeah.
21.
Chair, whilst agreeing with all that,
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
You're on,
yeah,
Page
we
40.
carried out further 40 cases, which identified 7, which were income previously assessed, and 1 case where read says 8 out of 40, which was incorrect, if I'm reading that right.
The testing
15%?
is very highly targeted on the initial type of error. So there's a myriad different, subcomponents of housing benefits, and the further testing is focused on the specific areas where the initial errors were conducted. So it's only a much smaller bit of the proportion of the population, that the further testing is undertaken on.
So what you're saying is, in the benefits, there's numerous items within that, so it's not just like a one-for-one.
Exactly. There are so many different types of benefit and subcategories and different groups of beneficiaries, and each of those has to be treated as a different population.
Does anything happen then with training or anything else after this to say, actually, there's something here we ought to look at?
Sorry, Chair, if I
Yeah.
may.
Please do.
Certainly, depending on the error, whether it's the same type of error in each of those sort of categories, then yes, they'll look for trends. And that's even prior to, KPMG coming in. We have somebody who checks all of that work to look for trends and things like that, and certainly training would be targeted. Or whether it was just down to a single operator or things like that. We'll certainly look to see what's caused the error in the first place and deal with it accordingly.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Happy? So back to page 21.
And if we could move on to page 24 on the introduction, I thought this is the plan for the coming year, so I just want to spend a little bit longer on this than I did on the last 2 documents, which were, as I say, mainly repeating the previous information. So, just to flip the pages, this page reminds you that there are 2 main elements, the financial statement and the use of resources opinion. And then we're going to move next into the sort of key risk areas. So what we're trying to do in an audit plan and to actually share with you particularly is what we're focusing on more as part of the audit. So on page 25, we've got the 2 mandatory areas to look at, which we focus more on management override of controls. Fraudulent revenue recognition we don't actually consider to be a significant risk given the nature of the income stream that councils have generally. So then if you go on to page 26, you can see the management override of controls in the middle there in the significant risk colour, and then on the left there is pension liability, and on the right of it there is valuation of property, plant and equipment and investment properties, and also faster close. And it's those three other ones that we then go into more detail on the subsequent pages. So page 27 we talk about the valuation of pension liabilities, and this to some extent has been a recurring theme of our audit, and it's really recognising that, as we said before, that the pension numbers are absolutely massive numbers in your accounts, and that they are based on estimates, and as such, you know, that puts them by their very nature at a greater risk of material misstatement. We therefore look at both the processes you undertake to ensure that those estimates are reasonable, and our own work on that, and that's the sort of high level view of why that's a significant risk. Let's take the question as we go.
Yes, you say there is a risk that the assumption and methodology used in the valuation of the authority pension obligation are not reasonable. So what are we going to do?
Well, these assumptions are undertaken by professionals such as actuaries.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
you know, you're not necessarily trying to second guess or say that you know more than the actuary, but what you can do is you can, for example, where you provide information that inputs into what the actuary does, you can make sure that's correct. When you see the actuary's report, you can benchmark or look at some of the assumptions and just take your own view of whether they're reasonable. Make sure that the information that they have provided actually stacks up and they haven't missed anything, and that it does get properly translated into the account. So there's a set of things that you can do.
But essentially the controls and operation are the same year on year because we're part of a group pension scheme, aren't we? So we have to rely upon the local government scheme making the right level of assumptions based on their actuarial guidance. And then it's whether or not we give them the right data. After that, we're in an assumption based on an assumption.
That's really the key, though, is obviously they work on the data that we give them. So although they operate the scheme for us, it's up to us to ensure that the information that they give to the actuary is actually accurate data from us. So we build in those checks and balances.
What we do is we work with the auditors of the pension scheme to sort of get assurance from them that they have checked the controls at the pension scheme side. So it's a little bit technical and boring, but it is very important because these are large numbers. So moving on to the second risk area on page 28, it's a little bit similar but a bit closer to home. So in this case we're talking about property, plant and equipment and investment property. So again, these are big numbers in your balance sheet, and again there are issues of valuation and sometimes accounting as well, in terms of how those are treated in your accounts.
Yes, because you do exactly the same, you use the same terms, the valuation of the asset are not reasonable. So can you
Well, in
explain?
this case, instead of actuaries, you're relying on professional valuers.
Yeah.
So again, it's how do you know, that you can't just take the word of another just because they've got the word valuers on them. You've got to have a process to assess why is that they a reasonable valuer, look at what they produce and say, is it reasonable? So, you know, you can go through the report and because you actually know the authority, you know, your assets better in some ways than the value, you might say, actually they've missed that, or they didn't understand what was going on there, and so you can actually challenge that much more directly.
Could I ask you? Because basically you just flag that and the risk is on us to make sure that we have a reasonable valuation of the asset.
Well, it's as much on us because we've got to audit it and make sure that we're happy with the number too. So again, we will have to understand the processes and controls management has, and then we look at those and undertake our own procedures.
But there'll be a standard, won't there? I mean, you go out to valuers, and this is what you say you're doing. I mean, whether you're doing write-offs, you know, capitalisation, all those sorts of things, they're just standards. So it should be relatively straightforward. I don't see why that's difficult, actually.
Well, it's actually...
I don't see why you'd actually question professional body who you've employed to
Well,
do
you've got
it.
your own examples in the recent past where you ask different valuers and they give you very different answers, so it can't be that standard. That's
Because
actually
at the end of
examples
the
at
day,
Daventry.
valuation is a judgment.
Yes, it is.
And it's a judgment based on a methodology that should be set out in the RICS, but it's still a judgment by the valuer on the day, given their view, experience and knowledge. And as you say, I know, I can't remember what, but some of our commercial buildings have various valuations, haven't they?
I mean, we have one of the experts in the room with the manager here who's responsible for the team of valuers. As you know, we have an in-house team of valuers, and we work very closely with them. You know, just like we've said with the actuaries, and they're the experts. Whilst we use the valuers, you know, we do go through and challenge some of the results, because it is subjective, if you like, in terms of what they come up with. And that's sometimes that challenge is not to challenge whether it's right or wrong, but to make sure that we understand their justifications for the value that they've given. Does it sound reasonable with what we know locally or nationally and things like that? So it's just checking that, if not for human error as much as anything else, you know, if we've spent a large amount of capital on an asset but it hasn't been revalued and it's just been missed, you know, it's for all sorts of things that we would then go through and check those valuations, but we do work very closely.
So you revalue assets?
If they've had substantial spend on them, then it's reasonable to think that the value of the asset
No,
should
sorry,
have
no.
changed.
If it's straight, if you bought something for $1 million and nothing's happened, you don't revalue it, do you?
Well, it depends. You might have bought it £1 million and it was a bargain, or you might have overpaid.
Are we subject to red book valuation cycles?
It depends what you're writing it off over a number of years.
Mr. Chairman, the simple answer is yes, we use the red book, of course, because that is the standard,
Yes.
globally, effectively. But then there are many intricacies in the way the red book is applied. The audit plan here actually summarises our valuation approach, which is we revalue a fifth each year, everything once every 5 years, but also, as Audra said, there are a series of triggers, as well as just common sense of saying, okay, this isn't really revalued this year, but we know we spent money on it, or it's fallen down, or whatever it might be that causes us to think this requires a look out of a cycle. And that combination is designed to give us the assurance that's sought.
Are you happy?
Not completely. But let it go.
Do you want to take it? You can take it out outside and silent, I think.
I hit it, sorry.
Okay. Faster close. That's my biggest worry.
So, well, I
Yes,
think, and this
yes.
is one that I suppose, you know, is a slightly different order in the sense that it's a more processing one rather than a technical one. And obviously it's one that we're highlighting across authorities because we have to sign off on the accounts a lot earlier than before. Now, you have all, you know, produced your accounts promptly for many years.
You mean
Shall
And
I say that again, Audrey? Many.
and so, if you like, the risk, you know, it's not as a risk as it would be in a place where, you know, they've been struggling to produce the accounts even on time. But nevertheless,
County Council
we've all got to
produces.
work together. So there's, you know, there's more pressure on us as well, because we've got to get through a lot more audits in a shorter period of time. And so it will, if you like, put a premium on everyone having very, very slick procedures. That's both the authorities and ourselves. And so these bullets in the middle here are the sort of summary of those slick procedures, which include the fact that, you know, we'll be doing audits right, you know, much closer up to the time of the committee. So as we do with our existing health audit, you know, we sometimes, the ISA 260 report, which is our main report on the audit, sometimes only comes out a few days before the committee, not within the normal committee paper cycle. And we're still completing work, you know, after it goes out, up to the date of the meeting, and possibly even a bit after as well. So it's kind of more of a process. So it's partly just to flag up to members that is how it will be coming over and warn people that that's how it looks and how it will feel, I think, in this coming year.
It's for 1 year only, because after the process will become automatic. So it's just this year that you will have the pressure of the...
Well, I think it will, no doubt it will be a struggle the following year as well, but hopefully less of a struggle.
It should be less of a struggle, because...
What we find in health is that almost always every year there's something that comes up that chucks you a bit off your stride, and something new has come in, or people forget to do that, or and it happens every year that there's some last minute thing that drives us all crazy, and we have to really work through the night to get it over the line.
Can I come back? So now you will have to sign the audit report in May, is that right?
If I may, Chair, there's really two deadlines that have changed. Obviously, in terms of me producing the actual statement of accounts, I must sign those off by the 31st of May, and then they must be audited by the 31st of July. And just to put that into context, that's a whole month off of our schedule, which is a third of the time that we would normally have to produce a statement of accounts. So no mean feat to get that done. And of course the audit date has actually moved from September to July, so there's 2 months off of that. So trying to squeeze that in. What I would like to say in terms of what we've been doing previously, members will know already we've been planning for this for the last 2-3 years in terms of getting that. So there are a lot of processes that I'm more than happy with in terms of meeting that deadline. And one of the ones that we've concentrated on is actually the valuations. So we've been working with the valuers to get that done earlier. And we actually have an interim audit, which John will come on to, where we try and get some of these bigger items out of the way, because it gives us more chance, if there are issues, to actually have that done as part of producing the statement of accounts, as opposed to it being audited afterwards. But a lot of work has gone into producing the statement, and whilst it's in here as a main item, I remain confident that it will not be an issue for Daventry.
Okay.
We have that on record. Thank you.
I've never missed a deadline yet.
Carry on.
I think that point back, the interim audit is a good one. That the idea is that you can cover off all the changes, all the things that are more complicated issues or that require judgment or discussion, so that actually at the final audit you can just bash through the final numbers. That's the basic approach that we're aiming for. So then I'd like to turn to page 37, which is the moving on to value for money, having covered the financial statement risks. So these are the value for money risks, and really they remain similar to what we've talked about with you before. One is focusing on your medium-term financial planning. I mean, that is a challenge for everyone. For some authorities, some authorities are in better positions than others. You have a pretty good position to start with, and a track record in finding other sources of income, which actually relates to the other risk at the bottom there, which is looking at investments, which is something you've done for some while, but just where there are significant, these are again, if you like, significant transactions in the year, so we look at them in a bit more detail, look at the decision making and the process, and whether there are any specific value for money questions. So that was really it. I think we should probably look at the fee, page 39.
But again, it's set forward, isn't it? So
Yes.
we don't have any option.
Not really.
I mean, apart from Audrey getting more money's worth than we paid her. Would that be fair?
I'm not sure what you mean.
And we should also emphasise our review of our independence and objectivity. Again, it's all pro forma, but actually it's a very serious process that we have to take internally, that we have to make sure that we are clearly considered and demonstrated our independence in order to take the audit. I'll take any other questions.
Yes, I go back to significant value for money risk. At the moment, value for money for me means a lot of trouble. regardless of what which is at the Northampton County Council. Now, you have delivery of budget. You are pretty sure that that is in hand. There is delivery of budget. You need to make a saving of 2.1 million, and you will deliver under spend. It's on page 16.
37. 37.
Oh, 37, sorry, I have 16 here. It's 37 at the top. And the delivery of budget is sustainable resource deployment. So you are pretty confident with what is said there.
I mean, if you take 17-18, you know, you can already be confident that you're going to deliver an underspend.
Yeah.
So that's 17-18, the current year that's about to finish. And then moving forward, this is just, you know, looking at your financial planning going forward and the fact that, you know, you need to keep working to ensure ongoing sustainability over the medium term.
And you are satisfied with it?
Of the 38 million turnover order,
Yes.
how much of that is not ours, as in we collect it on behalf of others?
Well, the 38 million turnover is ours, but obviously a large part of that is the benefits.
Yeah. So that's 14.4 of that 38, isn't it?
Yeah,
So that would be 24 million netish business.
yeah.
Any less, any things we do for others in that? Joint services or anything?
No, I mean, all the services that we do in there are related to our responsibility.
So across a 2-year period, broadly speaking, we're being asked to make a 10% saving, aren't we?
Yeah, could you just bear with me a second?
I don't think that's
Well, you are now, you're going to make an underspend.
Yeah.
That was at an earlier phase when you set off. That would have been the figure, is what I believe. Where you are now, for 17-18, is that you're going to have an underspend, which is what the paragraph sentence says.
For that, I wanted to check the numbers. Sorry, Audra.
Well, it depends how you interpret it, but you're always looking for a gap. You've got a gap that you project in your medium-term financial strategy in which you're looking to deliver savings.
At the end of the medium-term financial plan. Oh, yes, sorry.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes, sorry, what that,
Yeah.
now that I'm reading it properly, it would help, wouldn't it?
Well, Audra,
Yes.
we're really good to say, but you're not wrong.
So, what we were saying is that in 17-18, the medium-term financial plan covers a 5-year period.
Yes.
So it's at the end of that period that we actually have, we were saying at the time that we had a £2.1 million deficit.
Yes.
Okay, so I was reading that as 17-18, where actually we're making a surplus.
So you're looking at a 2% reduction year on year then over that 5-year plan, based on those numbers?
2% reduction.
Because you're roughly making a
Testing me now,
10%.
Chester, aren't you?
Yeah, I know, that's what
Yes.
I enjoy
We are
it when
good
he's,
for that.
when he's struggling, it's much more fun.
Yes,
It's rough. Thank you. That was easy, wasn't it?
there you go.
Have you any more questions?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No, it's quite all right. It was a very well made point, and it certainly focused my
No,
attention.
it's very important because in the peer review that Northampton County Council had, they specifically say that councillors didn't challenge enough, and so therefore they were responsible for the making or the failing of the council global.
It's easy when things are good,
Yes.
it's the truth of
Yes,
the situation.
yes,
For the minutes, Chair, in answer to the direct question as to am I confident in the robustness of it, I'm very confident.
In the robustness of the challenge you get from the members. Thank
Thank you so much.
you. Kevin.
So, just so I can get the titles right, 38 million is what?
It's turnover.
Is it turnover?
Yeah,
Well, it
Yes.
is, because the 14 million is not ours, is
Right.
it?
yeah. Turnovers are slightly, we're not
Business.
In Kevin's terms, it's turnover.
operated. Yes, if that helps members understand, yes, that's our turnover.
I can go.
But
I think I might understand other things as well.
But 37 million, you have 14 million that goes out of the budget right away with benefit.
That represents spend.
Yes,
in
yes,
the
yes.
38
So,
million.
Yes.
so you're down to 23.6
Yeah.
mil,
Yeah,
right? And that's turnover.
yeah, that's your
Yeah.
net turnover.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cost of services.
And cost of sales?
You mean income?
No, cost of
No.
sales, so what's the expenditure budget?
What's the,
What's the expenditure? Less than 14 million, what's the cost of expenditure? So what's the cost of running the council?
our net budget
Yeah.
is around 12 million.
That's what I thought. So there's, I'm just trying to understand
That's
that.
why I wanted to know where, because
Yeah.
Where's the
there's a gap
11 then?
It's
between.
the language being used,
Yes.
Chair, if I may. You know, we don't talk about net.
Yes,
We do, you see.
Yes, we
You
do.
see.
The expenditure more or less matches the income,
Yeah.
except to the extent that you do make, do underspend.
Yeah.
But the sources of income that matches the expenditure are different though.
Yes, I mean, the best way to do it would be to sort of to list out all the different sources of income, and they are varied, and some are more like turnover than others, and so on. So,
So I think that would be useful, to have an A4 sheet of paper, because that's all you need.
Well, can I help Audrey
Yeah.
here? And if you remember, she asked for contributions to
Yes.
the report that she produced last year,
Yeah.
and I have sent her my thoughts on it, and I'm sure she'd welcome other members' thoughts, because that's what you asked for, isn't it, at the meeting?
It is, and-
Which is why I sent you my comments.
And if I may, when it comes to the budget, you will be able to see the expenditure, the net expenditure and the funding that goes towards
So it's basically like a
running those
report.
services.
That is not what you do on Daventry calling?
Well, that's a summary of the
Yes,
statement of
yes,
accounts.
yes.
It's not quite the same.
Well, but it is.
I'm doing a training.
Oh,
Yes, yes,
Did you remember?
On the
Yes.
13th
No,
of
not prompted
February.
at all.
Yes. We are,
And it's in
and
the
I will
diary.
try to have a lot of members, because we need,
Yeah.
when we vote on the budget,
Well, they can make their own mind up, but I'd like to see something
Yeah.
then, if you could, Audrey, which actually says, these are the figures, so I can
And that's
actually...
what the medium-term
Yes,
yeah.
financial
yes.
plan shows.
yes.
Which you've seen.
Okay, for the years figures, forget about the 5-year plan, the year, you can take last year for all right.
Yeah. The medium-term financial plan shows it on a
Okay, fine.
year-by-year
Yeah.
basis.
Well, obviously that's projected, isn't it? So it's not quite
Well,
reality.
No, no, but you've seen this.
Yeah.
She's given us this.
We don't get to reality until it actually happens.
Well, no, that's why it's always interesting in 5 years, how people can go that far. But anyway, it's another subject.
Well, we have to.
In the business.
How are we doing? Are you happy now?
I'm
Do you feel robustly scrutinised?
I do, and I would also like, so if that was it, I would leave you at this point.
That is absolutely
Yes.
fine. Please get home early to your family or whoever.
In this case, it's just my son.
Well,
Victor is a victim.
don't have dominoes, it's not good for you.
For your well-being.
So shall we move to page 51?
Yeah.
And I think Tony is leading on this very important subject.
Yes, Chairman. The purpose of the report is to give members an overview of what we're doing in terms of readiness for the General Data Protection Regulation and the various stages of work are set out in section 4 of the report. So we've had a working group in place since October 16, and we've been working through a plan. We have completed phase 3 of the plan in all but a couple of service areas, and that's largely down to other pressures within those service areas at the time, but we're confident we'll pull them back in good time. We still have time in that the regulation requires us to have compliance by May this year, so we're not quite up to the finishing line just yet. Not really much more to say. We think we're making good progress with it. As I say, there's a description of what we've been doing set out in the paper.
So, because it will also apply for the members, for the elected members. So I think it would be useful if you can have on the member development a page of exactly what members should do and not do. Because despite having had a training, I do think half of them, sorry to say that, didn't understand the seriousness of the new act. So, and I have seen that at others, because unfortunately, with the new act, sometimes if I am traveling in a train, I will have opened my laptop and start. And I think we will not be able to do that anymore if you have...
Anyway. So we're so the council is a controller and we're processors. Yeah? So will there be a data sharing agreement between the council and the council laws as data processors? Question.
Well, we have got procedures set out within our information handling practices and within our policies. We've recently, in part in answer to Councillor Irving Swift's question, have registered or in the process of registering all members as data handlers.
I think picking up on Cecile's point, if there's not, it might just be this thing, don't lose it. If you lose it, tell us. Don't leave it on a train. Keep it locked up if you've printed it out and put it at home. When you've used the information, destroy it and sign here to say you understand. That's what I mean, a simple data sharing.
Yes, it's what I mean too.
So that every councillor signs it to go, actually, this is really simple. Because this is true in my organisation as well with people that we've got data for. You really don't get, it's actually quite simple if you follow some basic rules. And yes, you can work on data on the train, it's not a problem. But don't leave the laptop behind. And if you do, tell us.
But I think it's important and each councillor should sign that they understand.
That's what I'm saying. So a data sharing agreement, call it a data sharing agreement, but it is a one-pager and it's got the idiot steps on it. Which is, if you lose it, tell us. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, I think we have, as well as the data handling registration, we've also sent information through to members about the requirements under GDPR. So there's
but if they're not getting it, let's make it stupid and simple.
Because
where they have to sign for something.
I check with GM, the HR, to see how many people have gone onto the new things for councillor development. And very few members have used these new great facilities.
Is there anything?
No, I'm fine with it.
All happy with that? We're happy to take the recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to page 55. Audit progress report. Scott.
Thank you, Chair. This is the second internal audit progress report of the year. Very much in a standard format. This is the first year where we've provided two reports. Normally we'd have only one in the year, but members wanted more regular updates during the year, so we've now got one in January or so. The report covers any sort of significant changes or impacts on the delivery of the plan in terms of the audit resources, or any limitations in our audit resources. It also picks up then, summarises the progress that we've made against the plan up to the end of December. It will highlight whether there are any significant issues that are still outstanding for the 2016-17 annual audit review. And then we'll also then pick up on some of the service-driven parts internally where we have improvements around the service, around quality assurance and improvement. Okay, so if we pick up the audit resources issue, we have a full complement of staff. We've had that throughout the whole of the current financial year. The IT audit provider that we've had for the first time this financial year has been working really well, both with us and also with management, and they have been delivering to the agreed programme of work. In terms of delivery of the plan up to the end of December, we had completed 18 audits, which is roughly half of the audit plan at that point in time. And although we were at that point slightly behind plan, which may have been as an impact of the external quality assessment that we had for the first time this year, I do envisage that we will still deliver the plan by the end of the financial year.
With the ICT audit work, which I think is TIAA,
Yeah.
do they do, and if they do, is it us that does it or another committee? And this might be a question for Scott and Tony. So things like who checks that our website's okay, penetration testing and denial of access testing and stuff like that, is that done by these audit people or is that done by other external providers?
There's a couple of aspects to that. Obviously, as part of this year, they've been picking up the cyber security as one of the key risks to the authority. There's been some aspects of that that have been picked up as part of the audit. In terms of then internally outside of that, what the IT services team may be delivering, the ICT steering group that we have that meets bi-monthly, they also then, as part of that group, pick up any significant risks around security. And
so are we registering for things like cyber essentials and stuff like that, or are we already registered?
You may recall that when we discussed, and it's partly in this report around the results of the cyber security, we discussed at the last meeting around the PSN requirements that we're able to do, and in terms of the rigid or the sort of the extreme requirements of that when compared to the was it CES?
CESEA, I think it is.
Yeah. Certainly the auditors considered whether certification for our authority was something that they would recommend, and they sort of left it open to us. They didn't say they didn't see it would be a specific recommendation that would make to us, and we've determined together with discussion we had at the last meeting that we would stick in terms of implementing the recommendations on that.
I just note it's becoming more and more prevalent if you want to provide services for other people. They're looking for accreditation these days as part of their tender documents. We've seen that a lot in our sector. So it might be worth just putting back to the steering group to reflect on.
Okay, yeah, we could pick up that in terms of the other side of the equation, in terms of our sort of external providers. Yeah.
I think just to add to what Scott, or to emphasise what Scott was saying about the PSN, the Public Sector Network, that we go through a rigorous challenge to get a certificate of compliance each year on that. So that is a key part of our assurance.
Okay, so if we pick up the detailed work that we've undertaken during the year in Appendix A, which is on page 63, this sets out pretty much the planned work that we undertake during the year, but also then it's picked up some of the explicit work that we've picked up in addition to the original plan, and gives members an idea of the progress on those audits. The third column is quite useful because it provides a summary of the recommendations that we may have made within that original audit, and then if we've undertaken the follow-up, which ones of those are still outstanding.
So does 12 nil mean there's 12 outstanding or there's none outstanding?
If you're picking up the cash and banking arrangements one there, the second follow-up, the original audit had 12 recommendations, of which none were high priority, and also then, yes, from the follow-up, there are now none outstanding.
Okay, thank you. Just to understand the take.
Yeah. Similarly, the second part of that appendix, which is on page 67, that picks up the outstanding action plans at the current time. So this one's a little bit more up to date than the first one from our work up to the end of December. This one is the position at the 17th of January. So this is the current outstanding actions that management are to implement. We obviously work closely with them as part of the performance management framework for them to provide updates. We work closely with them on the implementation and whether they are looking to meet.
And is this appendix reviewed by the SMT?
Yeah, this particular appendix is provided to management It's available to all managers. They have direct access to it to see both the register and then the individual action plans across the whole authority, not just for their own area. It's provided to senior management and service managers as part of a sort of a bi-monthly prompt to them, but it's not like it's pretty much a live document from our perspective. We're working quite closely with them. We also, as part of the risk management group, this particular action plan and one which highlights the high priority recommendations also goes to that group for its attention, as does IT audit related recommendations go to the ICT steering group as well. So it's very much very live and something that's certainly grabs the attention of management when we get closer to the Corporate Governance Committee meetings.
I think it's a document that we easy. There's a progress. We note.
A happy team.
Yes, and I hope if you have a problem, you flag it before it happens.
Page 71.
Yeah, if I pick up the rest of the report from, if we go back to page 57. The table at the bottom of the page, which goes over into the other page, is the standard one, which everybody is familiar with in terms of members. Year on year we have this, and it focuses the mind of the committee in terms of the indicators that are in there as a barometer over the control.
Well, the ratio means the substantials are going up, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of the ratio one, you can see we're on a near perfect scenario at the moment.
I wouldn't say that's unless it's order, of course.
But you'll see from paragraph 4.8, I have commented on the two implementation recommendations ones there. Although we're slightly behind target of 90% on the high priority ones, which I'm not too concerned about. There's been a slight dip in the one for a percentage of all agreed recommendations. But having said that, you can see from the register, a lot of those are now considered implemented. So when we come through to do the follow-up audits on those, we should start bringing that percentage back up.
I think the mid-term report, we'll have to see fluctuations.
Yeah. If we move then down to paragraph 4.11 of page 58, really at this point just to highlight to members that we haven't had any to raise any minimal assurance opinions on audits to date. We picked up on then the corporate significant ones, which to date we've done the cyber security, which was considered at the last meeting. Since the last committee meeting in September, both the ICT steering group and the SMT have considered the action plan and agreed the management response. And at the current time we are considering that the management have considered that all the recommendations are implemented, and we're ready to do a formal audit verification of that.
On the top of 59, pending the agreed purchase of, how long is that going to take?
It's been
to purchase and install and have up and running?
I mean, the ICT steering group initially agreed this, as did SMT. I don't, in terms of purchase of it, I don't think it was in this small couple of £1,000, so that's not a particular issue in terms of requiring any growth.
But some of the layers in place, isn't it?
The implementation of it is obviously then as part of any other infrastructure and network things that the IT services are trying to deliver. But given the fact that we haven't finalised, we haven't undertaken our full follow-up yet, it's something that we will be taking back to the ICT steering group if there are any outstanding matters.
Could you just, when you do the final report, could you just confirm if it's been done?
For members, yeah, well, I will be picking up on this again in the annual audit review.
Sure, thank you.
In terms of then 4.12 of page 59, you'll see there were originally two areas that were still outstanding from the annual audit review last year. The one on community infrastructure levy has been finalised and dealt with. Yeah.
We are not dancing. That is for the recording. It's outside.
And there is just one low priority recommendation that's outstanding on the HR and people management one, which will be picked up towards the end of this month. Okay. There's a brief paragraph there then on ICT audit work, which I've mentioned is good progress. There's also then a section on the counter fraud work that we do, because I'm responsible for counter fraud. Really just to point out, as we're in the last quarter of the year, we're now looking to develop the next 3-year strategy. So that will be coming to members in due course. Then also really just emphasising, the rest of the report emphasises then the other work that we undertake, and really just to mention the significant work that we've undertaken with the officers on procurement and project management more recently. In terms of then the quality insurance programme, that is the external quality assessment of internal audit service. Members asked for the action plan to come to each and every committee. That's provided to you in Appendix B. Happy to take questions on any elements in there, but just to say that we made good progress on that, and the target dates are for some time in the near future.
Well, only one that's butting up to it is on page 77, isn't it? One number, which is the February one. Reference 2016 on page 77, which is a February date.
Yeah, which is for me to, I mean, obviously I'll be starting to draft and put together and having consultation on for the next internal audit plan. One of those conversations will now be with the Chief Executive.
Because I think Ian should own it. So. Alright, other than that, any questions, Tim? No? Anything else, Scott?
No, that's it.
You happy?
Yes, very happy.
Marvellous. Risk management process.
Mr. Chairman, it's the annual report to committee to let you know what we've been doing with risk management. The two significant areas are the review of the strategic risk register. So we're working through that process at the moment. The register's been reviewed by the risk management working group, and will go on to strategy group and council for approval. It's attached to your papers for information. You're not asked to go through and look at that in any great detail, just really to illustrate that there is work going on with that. And the other significant piece of work is the risk management health check, which is page 85, discussed at 4.5 in the report. So this was carried out back in September, and has been received by portfolio holders since it's received. And we have, the risk management working group has drafted an action plan to pick up the recommendations which came through from Zurich, our insurers. So the action plan is shown at page 101 of the papers. You will note that there is no progress being reported. The intention of this tonight is to show you that we have an action plan, and those are the actions we will be working to deliver. And the intention is to bring this back here periodically to show progress on that plan. Nothing more.
Kevin, I know you had some questions on this.
Yeah, on the plan then, it goes to the working group. Sorry, which planning? The risk.
This one. Risk. Picking on 101.
The health check action plan, yes.
Yeah, so that goes to the working group.
Yeah, the working group were tasked with coming up with an action plan which will be reported back to portfolio holders when they meet early in February.
Do the portfolio holders then look at their portfolio to see if there's anything in there related to risk which they are accountable for?
They will do, but not directly as a result of this. There is a risk management item on the agenda at the portfolio holders meetings, and they will receive an update report from meeting to meeting. Part of the recommendations and discussion coming out of the report was about
engagement of portfolio holders, greater engagement or greater evidencing of engagement of portfolio holders in ownership of risks, and particularly risks around significant projects. So that in part will be picked up by the action plan, and we will spend some time with portfolio holders in engaging them in that.
To explain their responsibilities.
Yes, yes.
But they are looking at this.
Yes, I mean, they already look at the risk management process and at the strategic risk register.
Right.
One of the things I raised with Tony, if you look at the risk register, it's got portfolio link on.
Yeah, yes, it is.
And that, what that actually means is the portfolio holder. And although there are not names in, and I kind of get why there's not names in, that's the portfolio holder is the owner of that risk from a member perspective.
Okay, right.
Okay, because it's not very clear though.
No, I thought it was.
That-
I took it the other way around.
Yes, no, that is a portfolio link there.
Yeah,
So
but it's not very clear in the way in which the report was presented. And I've suggested that this group can pick up that in terms of thought process. So there is a nice owner in place. The other thing that the report, the health check, talks about, again, I think we've touched on before, is it an issues log or a risk register? And there are a lot of risks on here. I'll again leave that as a context. It's mentioned in the CIO report, so I'll leave it there.
I mean, they referred to that, didn't they? They basically said, I think what they're trying to say is it's great, or have you got too much? That's what I think they're trying to say, subtly.
So we'll get the health check brought back to us, as we only have 3 meetings a year, I presume, each meeting.
Mr Chairman, you have more than 3 meetings a year.
We've gone up, haven't we?
Yeah.
We have.
No, you only come to 3.
Oh, I only come to 3, that's nice. I knew there was something.
I mean, certainly when there's significant progress to report, we can do that. But we need to come to every meeting for the sake of coming to every meeting.
Well, every other, do they?
Okay.
So
Cecile?
on the strategic risk register, where at one point we have other authority and so on. So
Which page are you talking about?
Well, I couldn't, but the problem is now with our neighbourhood or our NCC and so on, have we changed the risk register?
That's certainly been considered
Yes.
as part of the review process. At the moment, the review process hasn't yet gone back to portfolio holders,
Okay.
but it will go to portfolio holders and then
Yes,
formally to
because
strategy.
I think it's very important
Yeah.
to review the situation as things
Yeah.
are unveiling, and it will have consequences on us.
And could we, through you, ask the portfolio holders to review the reds that stay reds? So they've got lots of mitigation in, but they're still reds. So are they the right mitigation, or is there a problem? Query? And that would be good to know what the portfolio holders think, particularly around the financials, which is the first risk.
Yes. Yes, certainly we can feed that into the discussion of portfolio holders.
Because there's also a risk 5 is the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is again investment projects.
Yeah, Chairman, if I may, you're right that they do remember, but it is worth looking underneath the skin, as it were, because the first one starts off as B1, which is a high-grade risk, and is mitigated down to a C2. So although it's still red, because there's only 2 gradations of colour, there is substantial mitigation being shown still. I think it's one of the same is true for risk 5 as well.
But I think that I also talked to Tony separately about, I'm used to seeing the numbers, and it's easier to see the likelihood of impact scores as numbers rather than the C1 and C2. But that's just style, personality. But even though it's moved, the shape of the risk mapping which is on page 109, so you've got quite a lot that will stay in red. And given your definitions on the other page, does the map actually reflect the definitions? Personal view. I'm not sure that I'd map a 2 across, but maybe that's a question for review at some stage by the working group.
Yeah,
Because the definitions, if you read them and then apply them to your scoring that you've got on the map of reds, ambers and greens. Because you've got to be really bloody good to get to green.
Chairman, yes, we did have a discussion on this, and part of the discussion reflected some of the discussion we'd had at the working group, which was around looking at the definitions on the matrix and the risk appetite stuff. We will be looking at that as part of the actions on the action plan, and so there will be more debate on that.
That's all right, that's good.
Can I just go back to Councillor Parker's point on the content, or suggesting there might be too much in the strategic risk register? When we first developed our, not first developed, but certainly we've had some major review of our strategic risk register over the years, and worked closely with Zurich on that, and they've told us consistently that having around about 10 strategic risks feels to them about the right number for this sort of organisation. So whilst there's lots of words in here, lots of mitigation, lots of consequences, there are 10 strategic risks. So we have been working on that as being about right, but yeah, take on board the comments.
On the executive summary, page
Which page?
89. They said, however, it said values and acknowledge that in order to attain higher level of risk, culture and maturity of consistent risk assurance, models need to be adopted and implemented to fully align across the three lines of the defence model. How are we sure about that?
Yeah, I mean,
it is self-diagnosed, so.
Well, there's recommendations in the report and in the action plan around assurance mapping, and it's where we get our assurance from, and that's really about the three lines of defence. So we want, certainly from the risk management working group, we've given some consideration to that, and I think we want to explore that in a little bit more detail with Zurich about how we might get a relatively uncomplicated model in place to help us with that.
And you are doing the three priority key areas for improvement. You know, after there are three priority key for improvement, we are.
Yes, I mean those issues have been captured in the action plan.
Yeah.
And the recommendations of the report.
Any other questions?
Is that there that somehow it says that members should have more knowledge?
Yes.
And I think it's very important because again the same thing, and I don't know, in the next 2 or 3 years we will have a peer review, and if members do not understand the risk, how can they vote on something? And they will take a very big view if members vote on things they don't understand, because it's not good for you, and it's certainly not good for us members to vote. So what I would like is to make sure that as Finns we have the risk, and how to have a lot of members understanding what it is. So we will have that in April if it's possible.
What doesn't come across from this, which touches on Silverhawk, and I think we touched on it, is what's the risk appetite, however defined, whether it's a narrative or a percentage or a number of the council. Has the strategy group or portfolio group or the SMT defined its risk appetite?
It is defined within the risk management policy, which was reviewed last year. And part of what Zurich are telling us in there, that we need to be more clear in terms of what our definition is, and they're looking for a risk appetite statement as part of that policy document. So that's something that we will be looking at, and no doubt will drive a review of that policy probably ahead of when we would.
Because what's not in here is the 3 T's, is it, in terms of treat, tolerate and terminate? So I would also see within the risk management approach, which ones we're going to treat, which ones we're going to tolerate, and which ones we're going to terminate.
Chairman, we don't use the same terminology, but there are 4 recognised statuses for all risks, except reduce, transfer and avoid. And those are very actively used. Every risk in all of my services, I'm sure my colleagues the same, and in every project he's assigned one of those, and mitigating is assigned appropriately accordingly. Mostly it's reduced, but sometimes it's others.
Yes, I think
we would call them treats.
Yeah. I think the focus here has been on the strategic risk register, but beneath that we have a whole series of service risk registers and project risk registers, which pick up the more detailed work and provide that challenge in terms of treat, tolerate or terminate or in your terminology, transfer. That's fine. And in response to Councillor Irving Swift's comments about training, again, that's picked up in the report, and there's a recommendation or an action there about developing a programme. And I think what we have done in the past, we've held an annual session for members, and I think we perhaps need to be a bit smarter about what we do and look at our training content. And one of the specific recommendations is about tailored training for portfolio holders, because their role is different to the other members.
What I have spoken, with HR, and we are going to try to develop some things that is a bit smarter for members, and so like that you can concentrate on the portfolio holder, because the portfolio holder are the one who should be up to scratch. Members need, but maybe at a lower level or a more general level, and we are going to try to do that. But portfolio holder, I certainly want them to be a bit beefed up on their knowledge.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Page 111. The reason Simon's here. Welcome. Enjoy. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. I can probably be relatively brief. I understand that for this committee that there was a suggestion raised that it would be helpful to have an approach to how we provide oversight to council-linked entities. In the good old days, councils were just councils. They were a single legal entity, employed everybody, and that was it. And then we had contractors, and we kind of understood that. Now we're in a world where frequently councils have various entities which have their own legal existence, but in some way attached to them. And this report identifies the four that DDC currently has. Daventry North, PSP Daventry LLP, the Daventry Estate Company Limited, and DDC Operations Limited. All very different. One not even in active use, just sitting on a shelf effectively. But nonetheless, all legal entities joined to the council. The report then deals with a little bit of detail about each of those in sections 4.1 to 4.4 before considering what would be a sensible way ahead. And what we're suggesting, relatively straightforwardly, is that two things should happen. One is that strategy group should receive an annual report which essentially outlines how each of those entities is performing. It may be very brief indeed if an entity is sitting on the shelf doing nothing, but nonetheless is that can be recorded. And that we link on our website to the annual report of each such entity. Well, either provide the report or link to the report, and that's the same thing as far as the user is concerned. So we provide a means whereby which members and indeed the public can have ready access to information on those entities. And we think between those two steps, we provide a framework within which the sort of diverse bodies we have connected to the council can have an oversight.
Questions? Given that the member that raised it is not here, I'll try and ask some questions for you.
Yeah.
How are the board appointed, Simon?
Of which entity?
Of any of the entities? How are the directors appointed or the partners?
In the case of Daventry North, the directors are appointed in accordance with the council decision of last, whatever it was, I forget now, last year anyway, which said that the chief executive and the environmental portfolio holder would be the council directors on Daventry North.
So the holders of defined positions
Yes.
are the directors. Super.
There is a caveat there, which if they are incapable or unwilling to operate as such, for example, theoretically, so if someone was disqualified, for example, then the chief exec in consultation with the leader put somebody else up. But the basic idea is
so for the minutes, there's a clear process by which the directors are appointed, which is agreed by full council.
Correct.
Okay, I'll stop that question then. How is the partner appointed
North.
on the LLP?
Oh, we're moving down.
Yeah.
To Daventry, PSP Daventry LLP, the council's representatives again are appointed as determined by full council last annual council.
And are those individuals or positions?
There are two positions, leader and chief executive, and one individual, Councillor Malcolm Longley. So as and when Malcolm Longley is no longer serving council.
So who decides on the individual? Who makes that recommendation?
The recommendation is made effectively by the chief executive, by the officer body, but is decided by council.
Thank you. Daventry Estate Company, please. Same. I'm sure the answer is the same, but just for the minutes. It'll stop.
You're testing my memory actually slightly now. The original decision, which actually came through this committee on the way to council, was that we would have 5 directors, of whom 2 are officers and 3 are members. The members are appointed by council, and the officers are appointed by the chief executive.
Okay. Dole?
Dole, the officers, the directors, it just has 2 at the moment because it's on the shelf, are appointed by the chief executive.
If it becomes an operational company and the board expands from 2?
The same applies, but the important point is the chief executive will be looking to appoint people who are carrying the right skills and knowledge to be effective directors of the entity in whatever service-bearing capacity it comes to life in.
Were there any other points that keep being raised that so we can demonstrate we've asked these questions for him? That was it, wasn't it?
I think, Chairman, you can see what he was concerned about the appointment of directors and also reporting performance of
So, and to cover that point, just to summarise again, you will be publishing the performance to the strategy group and publishing the annual reports of the companies on the website.
That is correct.
Yeah, as per the recommendations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those companies are audited by our same auditor, or what is the system and what is the cost of that? We have no, you should.
You see, that's all in the report. So if you get the annual reports.
Yeah.
So
It will be there.
can I take us back to page 111 then, Simon? And members, are you content to agree with the recommendation in item 2? Serial 2? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes. No other business has been notified to me. Has anybody notified to you? No? Thank you all very much.